All right. Oh, Jicane walked out of our meeting. She got tired. Okay, sige. So, this is Queen Victoria, and she is one of the most important figures during the age of democracy and progress. Now, if you there is a link of the transparent sticky notes and it's waterproof. Okay, sige. So, please let us be boodled later. For now, let us talk about an age of democracy and progress. Now, if you already did the work that was you were supposed to do, um, we talked about. Did we talk about Victoria and how they hosted the Crystal Palace? Yeah, diba I told you about that. It was actually her husband. It's actually her husband, Prince Albert, that organized the exhibition, the Crystal Palace exhibition in London. Yeah. So they were very super supportive of industrialization, probably because it really greatly enriched England as well. And she is the Queen of England. I mean, I don't think she can afford this kind of jewelry and that tiara if England were not rich. I just want a crown that I can wear and I won't be judged and it's real, so I won't get kidnapped. That's just I mean, I just want a crown. Okay? Now, so this is the part that you had to do in your for your oh, please don't raise your hand, sweetheart. Just type it in the chat box. Okay. Um Oh, it's okay. Okay. So, democratic reform and activism is what you had to do, I believe, in your worksheet. So, we are going to do the second part, which is self rule for British colonies. So, by the 1800s, Great Britain had colonies around the world. Now, what was the main reason for the desire for colonies? It's just because they wanted to expand their land. Very good, wacky resources. Okay. Why did they need a lot of resources? No more spice, darling, because the spice was the first age of imperialism. We are already in the second stage of Western imperialism. Industrialization, very good for production. They needed raw materials so that they can put these raw materials in their factories. Okay? Now, so the colonies of Great Britain included outposts in Africa. When I say outposts, it means they stayed in the sides of Africa, always in the coastal area because they could not penetrate the insides because it was very dense forest. Remember the cheche flies and everything. And then they couldn't always, also, of course, what resources will they get from the desert? Okay. If there is a valuable resource there, it has not been discovered yet. Okay, unless you talk about oil. Now, oh no, I'm gonna sneeze. And then it went away. Oh no! It went away. It died. I hate that. Okay, so in these areas, the British managed to trade with local people, but they had little influence over the population. So when the British would go to a new area, they really just wanted to trade. And the only areas where they had great influence on the population was India, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Okay? Okay. Oh no, now it's stuck in my head. So when these dies, it just becomes a ghost and it infiltrates by day cell area. Okay, now it's stuffy. Now it's by. Whew. Okay, now by dose is stuffy, so you're gonna have to walk through by stuffy dose. Okay, now these colonies prospered. Weird baby voice. Baby voice. Okay, these colonies prospered as Britain did, even enough to stand on their own. Not good, not good at all. Okay, so let us talk about. We are not going to discuss We're not going to discuss India anymore because we already had Indian history when we had Asian history. So we're just gonna discuss Canada, um, Australia, and New Zealand. Okay, so Canada struggles for self rule. Canada was original. Canada was originally home to many Native American peoples. Okay, so Native Americans, like kind of like katong baga Aztecs, Bayans. Okay, Bayans. Okay, and Incans. Regular, just give me a few minutes. I will be fine. Okay, the first European country to colonize Canada was France. Okay. So France was the first place to colonize Canada because remember when they discovered the United States, France did not participate yet. They only participated in colonization. Azi, they only participated in colonization uh, when Napoleon became their a dictator. Okay. Wow. Okay, how many doctors recommended that solution, Parul? Okay. Don't worry, it's lessening. It's not so bad anymore. Okay. Canada, okay, so the first colonizers, because when Britain and everybody got a piece of America, like Spain, like for example, when they got a piece of America, they France felt kind of left out, and they said, "Okay, what about us?" And then Britain was like, "Okay, you can probably get that really solitudinous, whatever, like that." Um, okay, okay, I can breathe again. Okay, there. So France, yay! I can say France again. France. Okay, so yeah. So when France said that, okay, is there any part of America that we can have? And then they said, okay, why don't you go to that northern part? It's some if it's very icy most of the time, but there are parts that are okay. Yes, I know, Azzy. I need that. Okay, so there are places there that are fine. So fine. See, I can say fine. Canada, haha. Okay, I didn't have to do that Justin Bieber baby solution parole suggested. Okay, now, so France said, okay, fine, I'm gonna stay here. We're gonna do our best here and like whatever. The first European country to colonize Canada, therefore, was France. But France only wanted to do business in Canada. Okay? In Canada, they found so many animals whose fur was very precious. You remember the fur trade? It was very, very successful. So in Canada, the French just wanted to do business. They hunted all these fur um, and these furry animals. It's really so bad, bayaoy. The fur trade it made France very rich, but the animals died at very probably and a lot of animals, though I'm not 100% sure, but I'm kind of sure. I just don't know which ones. I'm pretty sure so many animals became extinct because of this. Because they found out pagyod that the fur of the babies are softer. And then the leather of the babies are softer. So ay grabe, the fur hunting by the French in Canada, it was very, very devastating for the animals. Yeah, the baby animals, not initiate order 66. I don't even know if they ate the meat. Get the fur of the screaming child. Oh my gosh. Yes. You're so bad, Aisha. Okay, sige. Um, A screaming child was really playing until dawn. Not said until dawn, but it was like almost 1 a.m. and she was still screaming. Uh, in the house, in their house, outside. They said outside. We go weird. Like outside my window. What if you wake up and she's there in the window? Go weird. Okay. So creepy. Okay, now, sige, let's proceed. So, they had fur trappers all over. So, that was kind of like the main occupation of the French. And also, they had missionaries. What religion do you think the French spread in Canada? Roman Catholicism or Protestantism? What do you think it would be? France. You think of France. Really? Why do you say Protestant, Aisha? They did not have anything Protestant in France. It was always Roman Catholicism. Okay, never. The Reformation did not even enter France. Okay, they were always Roman Catholicism. It did, it entered France, but not in the same way it's entered Britain or Germany and all of the other countries. They were very staunch Roman Catholicism because they always had absolute monarchy. And the Louis, the Bourbon monarchs really liked Roman Catholicism. Okay, now, so eventually the French tended to live with the Native Americans. A lot of them even intermarried, which is funny that Parul mentioned Justin Bieber because Justin Bieber came from Canada. And so probably Canada, Justin Bieber, probably this guy's a Bieber and he skinned a beaver because to turn it into a pelt. This is probably Justin Bieber. Okay, sige. Great Britain then took possession of the country in 1763 because anyway the French did not have a very strong hold on Canada. So the British eventually took over, and then especially because they got defeated, the French got defeated in the French and Indian War. So the French, when they took over, they stayed in this area, okay? The St. Lawrence Gulf, okay? The St. Lawrence Valley, the St. Lawrence area, the French settled there, okay? Which is why there are still a lot of people in the lower part of Canada in this area who speak French only, okay? French is a very, very common language in this area of Canada, even if they are in North American area. Many English speaking colonies arrived in Canada after it came under British rule. Some came from Great Britain, others were American who had stayed loyal to Britain after the American Revolution. So Canada therefore became like a hideaway for those who were still loyal to Britain after the American Revolution. Because the American Revolution, it kicked out the power of the British. So they said, oh man, we're gonna get so persecuted after this. Let's just leave and let us live somewhere else where we can be free. And that place was Canada. So they went there. Okay. Now, they settled separately, however, from the French, and this is how it was divided. So, see, this area here became British North America. And then this would be Ontario. This will become Ontario later, okay? And then this part, which I told you about earlier, became the French, which is Quebec, okay? Quebec became the French area of Canada, okay? Do you understand? So in Ontario, more English people, and in Quebec were more French people. Do you understand? Can you stop talking about random things in the chat? I'm going to. Why are we speaking of pizza and what is this? Okay, nothing random, please. You may react to the lecture. And I know you are reacting because I see here that Asi said pizza. Hawaiian pizza was invented in Canada. Nothing too random, okay? Now, so to repeat, who dominated Ontario, Azzy? What people dominated Ontario? Okay, and Quebec, Parul? Okay. Now, the French and the British, were they always friendly with each other? As history has indicated, no. Okay, they were not very friendly with each other. They were not really friends. Like it's not really something that you can say nga murag mo yung kahala oy friends yung kaini sila. They had a general dislike towards each other. So with this situation, the Ontario and Quebec situation, there were so many religious and cultural differences. What religious difference? What religion do you think would dominate in Ontario? Yes, because it was British. Okay. So religious differences, we have the Roman Catholics here, and then we have the Protestants here. And then the language, pagyo, there was very a large language difference. Okay. Both groups pressed Britain for a greater voice in governing their own affairs. They wanted to be separated. Can Ontario be an autonomous country, and can Quebec be a different country? Because we can't work together like this. In 1791, the British Parliament tried to resolve both issues by creating two new Canadian provinces. So that is Ontario and Quebec. Each province had their own assembly, okay? Of their own elected assembly. The division of Upper and Lower Canada temporarily eased tensions. Both colonies, the royal governor, and a small group of wealthy British held the most power. But in the 1800s, middle-class professionals, na po di mga middle class, the rise of the middle class, it happened everywhere. When there is a rise of the middle class, there's always some change that's about to happen. Okay. During the early 1800s, the middle class professionals in both colonies began to demand political and economic reforms. And one such middle class person is Lord Durham. In Lower Canada, the British Parliament sent a reform-minded statesman, Lord Durham, to investigate the situation. The British, in 1839, Durham sent a report to Parliament that urged two major reforms. He said two changes have to happen for the two of you to live in peace. That's what they call, if you are part of the Parliament, you are a lord or a lady. And they were not technically, yeah. Murag, it's like attorney ba? Murag, something like that. It's kind of like a title that you gain, not by inheritance but through whatever. Okay, but that's not how it was before, huh? Okay. First, Upper and Lower Canada should be reunited as one province. Okay, Lord Durham, you said we cannot have this. Quebec is separate, Ontario is separate. They have to be united, and we should encourage more immigrants. Not nga French adto ra gyud sa Quebec, and then ang British adto ra gyud sa Ontario. We should blend, okay, mix it. Like, you remember, oh, interesting, what I did to my coffee, my milk settled in the bottom, and then the black coffee was on top. We have to mix that up, because if you don't mix it up, it's not going to be this delicious caramel color, and it's not gonna taste good. Yes. Okay. So, that's what the first report of Lord Durham was. Okay, in this way, the French would slowly become part of the obviously more dominant English culture. So, dali, let's be friends. Second, colonists in the province of Canada should be allowed to govern themselves in domestic matters, which is kind of the situation here in the Philippines. The president doesn't really hilabot what the mayor decides in Cebu, as long as it falls under the Constitution. If it's still constitutional, it's fine. The president only hilabots when it doesn't follow Constitution anymore. Okay, so that was the Durham report. By the mid 1800s, many Canadians, after following the Durham report, believed that they needed a strong central government. Okay, a central government would be better able to protect the interests of Canadians against the United States, whose territory now extended from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. So they were like, man, dakuan na oy. The United States is so big. Nya kita, before it was, this is the Dominion of Canada raman, kaning Ontario and Quebec. That was it. That was Canada. We should expand, and we should have a central government. Okay. In 1897, so kanin Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, they were all added to the province of Canada, and this therefore became the Dominion of Canada. And as a dominion, Canada was self-governing in domestic affairs. That was the second one. They will be able to be self-governing in domestic affairs, but they were still part of the British Empire. Okay? So, kanini, dako na ang Canada. And they were generally peace-loving. That is what they always say, even until now. Nga people from Canada are generally nice. A lot nicer than people from the United States. Okay, that is the common stereotype. It's a nice stereotype, no? Can you imagine? That is the stereotype. That's a nice stereotype, I guess. Okay, so now, Canada's first prime minister is John Macdonald. So is he old Macdonald? I cannot verify, but this was the first prime minister of what do you call this? Canada. And he expanded Canada westward by purchasing more and more land. So he said, sige, purchasing land, okay, from the Native Americans, from previous owners. So he really kept saying buying land, okay? Then Canada eventually stretched to the Pacific Ocean. So now Canada was already very big because of Prime Minister John Macdonald. And Macdonald began the construction of transcontinental railroads, and it was completed in 1885. So now it was not hard to travel from Quebec to British Columbia, or from Ontario if you go to Yukon. Okay, so okay, good kaya na siya. So very, very accessible. I think John Macdonald was a very efficient prime minister in making sure that Canada would be very accessible to many, and people will be attracted to also migrate there. Okay, so that is Canada. Now, Australia and New Zealand. Okay, so let us discuss. This is just going to be a short history, ha? It's not like I've told you the entire history of Canada, the entire history of Australia. It's impossible. It really, really is impossible if we do it country by country. We don't have enough time for that. But anyway, let us talk about Australia and New Zealand. So, the British sea captain James Cook claimed New Zealand in 1769 and part of Australia in 1770 for Great Britain. So James Cook is really credited as the one who found New Zealand and Australia, but it was already inhabited. When James Cook arrived, it's not like it was empty. Nga Australia and New Zealand were empty. There were already people, and the people were Maori. Okay, these were the Maori people. I think they are one of they really have the same qualities of Native Americans, no? It's really the same kind of vibes. In New Zealand, Cook was greeted by the Maori, a Polynesian people who had settled in New Zealand around 800 AD. So they had been living. So can you imagine 800 AD? How many years is that? New Zealand was discovered in 1769. So how many years? 1769 and 800. So the Maori lived in peace in New Zealand for how many years? 1769 minus 800. How many years were they living in peace? Nobody can answer, can do that simple math. Okay, Parul, 739 years. Okay, 739 years. They were independent. They were not bothered by anyone, and all of a sudden, James Cook arrives. Okay, the Maori culture, very similar to the Philippines, was based on farming, hunting, and fishing. Very simple life. They traded with each other. They traded with other islands. It was very simple. Okay, pero giguba gyud sa British, all because they really just wanted raw materials. In Australia, these were the people. By the way, these people are still allowed to function as they want. Kind of like the Igorots and the many indigenous tribes in the Philippines, we don't bother them. As long as they don't break the rules set in the Constitution, we just let them live however they want to live. Okay? So when Cook reached Australia, he considered the land uninhabited, but he did not know that there were aborigines, okay, or aborigines, aborigines, whatever you want. It's like potato. As Europeans later call the native people. Okay, aborigines are the longest ongoing culture in the world. They are considered the longest ongoing meaning they have not really changed. In the world, they have the longest. Sila gyud ang pinaka, nope, we are not going to give up our ways. No industrialization, nothing. We want to keep our lives simple. Anyway, we are very happy. We are very contented. We don't want to be moved to cities. I really understand. Yes, there are, but they have acclimated a little bit to modern society. Like for example, the Badjaus, they still live the same way they did, but they're wearing t-shirts. Kanang mga ingana ba, they're wearing kay kanya, like for example, this one, the weave, that's really fiber, and fiber that was woven by the aborigines, dyed, natural dye, that was not bought in a mall. So they really refuse to kana love, I don't know. I don't know what is really on their faces. Clay, probably limestone. When you grind certain rocks, it's white. They do that for intimidation, I think. Okay? These nomadic people fish, hunt, and gather food. They're still hunters and gatherers. Not like, as I was saying, like the Badjaus, they're wearing modern shirts. They buy from groceries. Kanang mga ingana na ba, they don't solely live as they did before. Okay? Grabe gid kaayo ni ang aborigines. Very stubborn. We refuse to change. Okay? Britain began colonizing Australia in 1788 with convicted criminals, okay? With convicted criminals. The prisons in England were already overcrowded. So, to solve this problem, the British government established a penal colony in Australia. A penal colony is a place where convicts were sent to serve their sentences. To build Australia and to build a new British city in Australia, they sent convicts. Kani rapist man kano, sige padaka Australia. Ikaw kuan man kano, murderer, sige padaka Australia. The convicts were very happy. They were like, yes, whole new world. Okay, go. Okay, so they went. It's kind of hard to leave if they want to start a new life in Australia, which is what happened. That is why the accent in Australia, it's not as soft as the British accent. It's not as refined because these were like the Australian accent is a very it's a modified. I don't want to say modified, but that is okay because most of them were convicts from the start, so they had a rougher way about them. Do you understand? So a lot of the great great grandparents of Australians now were criminals. Okay, now many European nations used penal colonies as a way to prevent overcrowding of prisons. Like, for example, the governor generals that were sent to the Philippines, a lot of them had scandals in Spain. Like, for example, hala, nag-scandal lagi si Kuan. Sige, ihimo na lang na governor general sa Philippines. Munang we were oppressed po. Uy, paita, uy, can you please stop sending like the rejects to our country? But at least we were never a penal colony. Although I think parts were, but okay. After their release, the newly freed prisoners could buy land and settle. Okay? They could, so that answered Chesa's question. Okay, so nga, can't they just leave? Don't worry, if you help build Australia, then you can buy land and settle. What a good deal. Free British settlers eventually joined the former convicts in both Australia and New Zealand. Isn't it a very unusual way to start a nation, no? It's like New Zealand and Australia murabag. Wow, it's like uh penal colony good. And then after that when everything was built, everything was settled, the Free British joined them and said, sige, let's live together. Your neighbor's a criminal. You're like, Mama, I'm in love with a criminal. Kaya nag-intermarry naman din na sila. So, it's so weird. Okay, so, in the early 1800s, an Australian settler experimented with breeds of sheep until he found one that produced high-quality wool and thrived in the country's warm, dry weather. So um, there was one who experimented with breed. So he was a geneticist and said, sige, let's find a breed. Let's manipulate the genes or whatever to find sheep that can survive even if it's really hot in some parts here. And then so, okay na siya. Although sheep are not native to Australia, the raising and exporting of wool became its biggest business. So this is how Australia and New Zealand survived. To encourage immigration, the government offered settlers cheap land. So this became like the new land of the free. Nga murag niingon din silang daghan na nagtao sa America, oy di daghan pag kaiglan sa America, but they're like there's another place that you can go where you can settle, and it's called New Zealand and Australia. Okay, so barato kaingad to compared to America. So many settled also now. They settled around these parts. Okay, as you can see, these are the greener parts of Australia. Okay, the population grew steadily in the early 1800s and then skyrocketed after the gold rush of 1851. They found pagid gold. So there was a gold rush in Australia. So many people wanted to go there. I wish we really had time to discuss what the gold rush was. But basically, they found gold and people went crazy. Okay, and said, oh my gosh, let's go there. Okay, can you imagine? You can just get gold from like anywhere. Because the Aborigines, they did not know the value of gold. So they were just kind of like, oh yeah, those yellow rocks there, the gross ones. Okay, so anyway. Okay. The scattered settlements on Australia's east coast grew into separate colonies. So the east coast became colonies. Meanwhile, a few pioneers pushed westward across the vast dry interior and established outposts in Western Australia. So this is what Australia looks like. European settlement of New Zealand grew more slowly. This was because Britain did not claim ownership of New Zealand as it did Australia. Okay? Rather, it recognized the land rights of the Maori. So at least the Maori were very happy. Until now, the Maori in New Zealand are very well respected. That even the New Zealand rugby teams, they do the haka dance. Have you ever seen a haka? Haka is one of the coolest, like the war dance of the Maori. It's so cool. So that is they're the Maori is really celebrated as the culture in New Zealand. So of ancient New Zealand. Okay, now this was rather they lived together, they dwelled together in peace. In 1814, missionary groups began arriving from Australia seeking to convert the Maori to Christianity. The arrival of more foreigners stirred conflict between the Maori and the European settlers over land. Responding to the settlers' pleas, the British decided to annex New Zealand in 1839 and appointed a governor to negotiate with the Maori. Magridi lagi dayo, no? Nice naman unta to. Nice naman unta to nga they lived together in peace. They respected the rights of the Maori. But later on, greed will always get the best of people. Okay? So now there was all of a sudden, this guy is like, sir, don't do it. Don't do it, sir. Please do not provoke the Maori. And then this guy is like, are you sure? And why is he doing this? It's like, or is he pointing? No, this guy's pointing there. He's like, what does this mean? You want to buy that? Kalo, oy, oy, I don't know what's going on here, dude. Okay, now, in a treaty signed in 1840, the Maori accepted British rule in exchange for recognition of their land rights. So, ningon na lang ang Maori, oh man, we can't really, our weapons cannot defeat British weapons. So, sige, let's recognize their authority, but they cannot violate our land rights. Like Canadians, the colonists of Australia and New Zealand wanted to rule themselves, yet remain in the British Empire. During the 1850s, the colonies in both Australia and New Zealand became self-governing and created parliamentary forms of government. I think it was smart to let Australia and New Zealand go because they were so far from Britain. It was far from India. It's really far. Okay, so kanang gibuhian na lang yun, sige pag self-govern na lang mo diha, but you will still fly the British flag. In 1901, the Australian colonies were under a federal constitution as the Commonwealth of Australia. During the early 1900s, both Australia and New Zealand became dominions. And they were actually the ones who came up with the secret ballot, which is still something we do until now. Okay, because if you vote kuno in public like that, basin, can you imagine if that's how we will do the elections on Monday? Who will vote for BBM? Nya mo race ka niya, imong anak nag-BBM niya, ikaw, Lenny. The conflict it will stir, okay? Grabe kaayo. People might get killed and all of that. So, they made it a secret. Facebook, exactly. That's why I stay away from posting my political ideals on Facebook. If you want to know what my political ideals are, message me or let's have coffee or something like that. Okay, Rajud. So many people are fighting on Facebook. Grabe kaayo. As if one ideal is correct and the other na gyud is sinful. No, some people treat it that way. Nga, if you're Lenny, if for example you're pro Lenny, something's wrong with you. If you're pro BBM, something's wrong with you. Murag ing ana gyud, murag ay grabe. Sige, just vote secretly and just pray. Because whoever will win, I will pray for that because that's what God commands. Nga, you pray for the government and you submit to the government. So, okay, so for the secret ballot, sometimes called the Australian ballot, was first used in Australia in 1850, okay? And then in 1893, New Zealand became the first nation in the world to give full voting rights to women. Okay, yay! Vote the women. New Zealand was the first country. However, only white women could vote. But may na lang. It's a win, it's a loss, it's a win for feminism, it's a loss for racism. Only white women could vote. Okay. Native peoples and other non-Europeans were excluded from democracy and prosperity. Diseases, so they were excluded. So hala, the British were getting very rich in Australia and New Zealand, but the natives were not included. They were discriminated and all of that. Lo, uy, uy. Plus, the Europeans pag yun brought diseases. Just like in America, you remember when the white people went to America, they brought a virus nga nangamatay ang mga Native Americans, right? One third of the population. Same thing. Same thing. When the white people came, one white person sneezed and it killed a third of the nation. Saan na inyong mga gross? Why are you bringing your germs here? Excuse me. Okay, makalabad og what the white people did. Anyway, what's POC? Yes, yes. People of color pa kuno ang tanawa lang. Even like that I don't know if I can say this, but that thing that African Americans say, kind of black don't crack. They don't even age. They don't even age as quickly as white people do. Like like Obama and Trump are around the same age, but Obama looks so much younger than Trump, right? If you think about it that way, and it's like white people get age quickly. Like Shawn Mendes is younger than Jimin. I can't believe that. Like Jimin looks like a child compared to Shawn Mendes. So maybe Asians and black people do not age as quickly, or I don't know. I don't know what the what happened to this? Jikane, why are you? You're the one that is like in on my. What did I do to Jikane? Jikane is number one lagi in my koan. Maybe I'll unpin her. There. Okay. Wow. It was so big. Jikane's box became so big. Okay. Now, as Australian settlements grew, the colonies displaced or killed many Aborigines by virus or on purpose. It's very bad, good. So in New Zealand, tensions between settlers and the Maori continued to grow after it became a British colony. And between 1845 and 1872, the colonial government fought the Maori in a series of wars. Look how ridiculous that is. Who got there first? Who got there first in New Zealand? Nobody got there first. Who got there first in this war? Who settled there first? Who settled New Zealand first? The British? Hello? I don't know if the chat box froze. I cannot. Maori. Okay, now, very good. So the Maori, no, the chat wasn't moving. Okay, so the Maori settled there first. Probably I'm lagging. But the British are now fighting them in a war to drive them away and to stop demanding. Nga murabag the British like, why do you keep demanding your land will be... Excuse me, we were here first. This was our land. It's so strange. It really is so strange. And then, reduced by disease. Oh my gosh, kanig yung disease, uy. And outgunned by British weapons, the Maori were finally driven into a remote part of the country. They were really pushed to remote places. If they were not dead, then they were kind of like exiled. These were the original people who dwelled in that land. Okay, so very, very sad. And it's always the case. Like the Native Americans now, where are the Native Americans? The Native Americans are very poor in America. That is why I really hate it when they push for human rights, gay rights, and ingana, whatever. And then abortion. And then they are not fighting for the rights of the original settlers of America. How come there are no rallies for that? Ya, kusog kay ng rally-rally sa uban. There are no rallies for, please, the Native Americans, their rights. What should? They're so luoy there. Ay, nako. Anyway, let's not get started on that because it really fires me up. I really hate it because it's so hypocritical in so many levels. Okay, now the Irish win home rule. So from Canada, from Australia and New Zealand, let's go to our last place, which is the Irish, which is Ireland. Okay, English expansion into Ireland had begun in the 1100s when the Pope granted control of Ireland to the English king. Baga pag naong ang Pope ani. English king, you want Ireland? Go get it. Get it, boy. Is yours, okay? Because the Pope was so feeling, I'm the king of the world. And this is the 1100s, which is still fresh from the Middle Ages pa ni siya. So powerful ba kayo ang Roman Catholic Church during the Middle Ages. So it just gave Ireland to England. English knights invaded Ireland and many settled there to form a new aristocracy. The Irish, who had their own ancestry, culture, and language, bitterly resented the English presence. So the Irish, if you think the Maoris and the Aborigines are stubborn, the Irish, the original Irish settlers, are more stubborn. Ireland, it's the best, dude. Our culture is so like whatever. What, dude? So now it's even white versus white. It's like it's not even like brown versus white, people of color versus white. Now it's white versus white. Um, Football. Hapit na ra ba? World Cup. Laws imposed by the English in the 1500s and 1600s limited the rights of Catholics and favored the Protestant religion of the English and the English language, which Ireland was not. They were always Roman Catholic, always good ning Irish. They preferred Roman Catholicism. Over the years, the British government was determined to maintain its control over Ireland. It formally joined Ireland to Britain in 1801. Though a setback for Irish nationalism, this move gave Ireland representation in the British Parliament. Irish leader Daniel O'Connell persuaded Parliament to pass the Catholic Emancipation Act in 1829. So while they were under England, they used it as an opportunity to pass a very important law which was called the Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829. This law restored rights to Roman Catholicism, okay? Kaning Catholic Emancipation Act because Protestant man yun ang 1829. Protestant man yun ang gi-favor. So they were like, dili. So that's what Daniel O'Connell did. However, shortly after that seeming win, in the 1840s, Ireland experienced one of the worst famines, not just in Ireland, but of the world. This was really a super bad famine, okay? One of the worst famines of modern history. And for many years, Irish peasants had depended on potatoes as virtually their sole source of food. They only ate potatoes because potatoes you can plant underground, right? It does not need to be cultivated. You just literally leave it there, wait for it to grow, and then harvest it. They were just living on potatoes. This really made me wonder why fries are not Irish fries. Why are they French fries? All the potatoes grew, I think, in Ireland. Okay? It's a stereotype. Okay. About out of a population of 8 million, 1 million died of starvation and disease over the next few years. Luoy gyud kaayo, oy. Luoy gyud kaayo. 1 million died. Starvation pag yun. When you die of starvation, that is really something. And this was in the modern era, ha? This is in 1840, Parol. You have to remember, while the rest of the world was industrializing and the rest of the world was rich, Ireland was suffering the Great Famine. It's horrible, I know. And while the rest of the world learned how to eat all these new delicacies because, whatever, Ireland was just eating potatoes. It's very, very luoy. During the famine years, about 1.5 million people fled from Ireland. So one Anton, yes. Francis eating cake. Okay. During the famine years, about 1.5 million people left Ireland. So 1 million died, 1.5 million moved out because they're like, I've had it here. I cannot do this anymore. Okay. Oh, is a potato cake a hash brown? Anyway, most went to the United States, others went to Britain, Canada, and Australia. At home in Ireland, the British government enforced the demands of the English landowners that the Irish peasants pay their rent. Why do you push peasants mangyud? Nag-famine na ha? Gipabayran pag yun. Asa naman inyong rent? Can you imagine if during the pandemic, without that Bayanihan Act, I think people would really revolt. You know the Bayanihan Act, right? During the pandemic, it really urged people not to demand rent or to even lower rent because people could not really earn the same way. Grabe. Even banks had to stop collecting credit card debt for a while because people were really devastated. Many Irish lost their land and fell hopelessly in debt, while larger landowners profited from higher food prices. Britain! They collected rent, they increased pag yun food price. It's a famine. Grabe. A traveler described what he saw on a journey through Ireland in 1847. We entered a cabin. Stretched in one dark corner, scarcely visible from the smoke and rags that covered them, were three children huddled together, lying there because they were too weak to rise, pale and ghastly, their little limbs, on removing a portion of the filthy covering, perfectly emaciated. Emaciated is karang there's no more muscle. There's no more, so it's skin and bones, literally. There is no more muscle that is holding the, what na gyud siya? It's like eyes sunk, voice gone, and evidently in the last stage of actual starvation. The 1800s was not a good time for children, no? In industrialized countries, children were working. In Ireland, children were starving. It's really it was not an easy time for children. Look at the Great Famine, no? 70% remained in Ireland, though millions more Irish emigrated. 12% died, 18% emigrated. Where did they emigrate? United States, to Britain, to Canada, and to Australia. During the second half of the 1800s, opposition to British rule over Ireland took two forms. Some Irish wanted independence for Ireland because they felt like, can you stop pressing us? Can we just rule ourselves, please? A greater number of Irish preferred home rule. Home rule is where the locals control over internal matters. Kind of like domestic matters are ours, but we can still be under you guys. The British, fearful of Irish moves toward independence, refused to consider both options. Come on. There's like, come on, just please just give us. This is nice, oh, ancient Hibernians. So people are hibernating here. I like this so much. Okay. One reason for British opposition to Home Rule was concern for Ireland's Protestants. They feared being a minority in the country dominated by Roman Catholics. Most Protestants lived in the northern part of Ireland known as Ulster. Finally, in 1914 is already World War I era, ha? Finally, in 1914, Parliament enacted a Home Rule Bill for Southern Ireland. So they said, sige, mag-home rule mo dire, but the North, let's protect that. 1 month before the plan was to take effect, World War I broke out in Europe and Irish home rule was put on hold. Frustrated over the delay in gaining independence, a small group of Irish nationalists rebelled in Dublin. during Easter week 1916. So it's like nag-World War One, o nya, nag-rebellion pag yun sa Ireland, shoot. British troops put down the Easter Rising. That's what this is called, ha? The Easter Rising. That's what it is called. Their fate, however, aroused wider popular support for the nationalist movement. Hapit na tanahuman. After World War One, the Irish nationalists won a victory in the elections for the British Parliament. To protest delays in Home Rule, the nationalist members decided not to attend Parliament. Instead, they formed an underground Irish government and declared themselves independent. So it's like, you know what? If you're not going to declare us independent, then we're going to declare ourselves independent. Isn't that what independence means? That we don't need your permission? So we're going to just declare ourselves independent. So this is actually what the Irish Republican Army did. Okay? The Irish Republican Army, or IRA, an unofficial military force seeking independence for Ireland, staged a series of attacks against British officials in Ireland. The attacks sparked war between the nationalists and the British government. So this is in 1921. This is so cool. This is a boundary. And this is like the Ulster people, and this is the Free State people. They were friends, but they just talked, and then this is the boundary. Good. It's so, I love this picture so much. In 1912, Britain divided Ireland and granted home rule to Southern Ireland, and Ulster or Northern Ireland remained part of Great Britain. The South became a dominion called the Irish Free State. So they're like, "Bye, kumusta naman ka, bye? How's your side of Ireland?" Yeah, they're still chill, may na lang. Okay. However, many Irish nationalists led by Eamon de Valera continued to seek total independence from Britain. And finally, this was granted after World War II in 1949, and the Irish Free State declared itself independent, and they are now called the Republic of Ireland. So basically, everything we discussed was like Britain not minding their own business. And they're trying to take things that did not initially belong to them.